It would be very helpful to do that. This is our last Winter Wisdom of the season, and only 2 of them have been interrupted by people who had to reach into their purse and try and find their phone, and I'd appreciate not having to have that happen again. We're a member-supported 503c nonprofit organization, and we rely upon our members to support us. But we are lucky to have some sponsors like the Highlands, which are who is a sponsor of our Winter Wisdom series. And I'd like you to join me in thanking them by applauding. And if you're a member of their community, you can tell the people in charge how much you appreciate being part of both communities. It's always helpful to keep our sponsors happy. Thank you. A couple of minor things. We are a member-supported nonprofit, so we never meet our budget. We rely upon our members to supply our budget as much as possible, but our membership and tuition only cover about 50% of our costs. And if anyone has a blank check, we would love to have a contribution to our annual fund, and that is very, very important for us. More information can be found about us at midcoastseniorcollege.org, just all together. But if you just put in Midcoast Senior College somewhere, you'll find it. You'll get information about our programs. We also have information in the back on the tables about this. Whoops, sorry. Thank you very much. Volunteer organizations always rely upon volunteers, and I'm such. So please find out about this. I'd like to bring Reg Elwell from our Midcoast Senior College Winter Wisdom series, and he'll give you the introduction.
Thank you, Bruce. Well, thanks and welcome to the finale of our Winter Wisdom 25 season. And we hope you've enjoyed our presentations this year. And reminder that our planning is already underway for Winter Wisdom 26. And I would be delighted to hear from you, our audience, with any suggestions you might have for the coming year. And a special note, I'd ask that you join me in expressing special thanks to Donna Marshall for the many behind-the-scenes tasks that she performs for us. Okay, to the act at hand. Sean Fleming is a composer, conductor, arranger, pianist, organist, harpsichordist, accompanist, teacher. The list is endless, as is his familiarity with multiple music genres, from classical to jazz, Gilbert and Sullivan to Broadway. And we're delighted to have him and his Red Hot Peppers band with us today. And just a word of caution to you all, please note that foot tapping is permitted during this presentation. But we urge you to try to resist the temptation to get up and start dancing in the aisles for the upbeat numbers. The sanctuary has held many a dance, but it's a bit crowded today to safely swing. Sean, welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Reg, and everyone else who made this happen today. It's great for me and the entire band to be here today, and great to join you on such a beautiful day. I'm gonna talk a bit about the history of ragtime, jazz, early jazz, but it's gonna be mostly a listening activity today because we have the band here. But I wanted to talk a bit about how many of you like jazz or jazz fans? Anyone? Yeah, so quite a few, yeah. And how many of you like early jazz, Dixieland, that sort of thing? Yeah, me too. Well, before there was jazz, there was ragtime. And ragtime is one of the main precursors of jazz. And in the 1890s, a guy named Tom Turpin in St. Louis, Missouri, had a rosebud saloon kind of cafe thing. It was actually this big building on the outskirts of St. Louis, and he would continually invite ragtime players such as Scott Joplin to play at the cafe, the Rosebud, so that was kind of a nexus of ragtime. And the first published rags, there was kind of sort of one in 1894, but it wasn't really a rag. But the first year that rags were published was 1897. And I'm going to play one of the very first that was published by Tom Turpin, the Harlem Rag. So published in 1897. Oh, and by the way, there are programs back on the table there if you'd like to pick one up. It lists pretty much everything we're going to play, and also some cool little notes about the history of each piece and that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with Harlem Rag, and this is just with me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So now the ragtime, of course, was descended from or developed from marches. And the first marches that were really popular were by Sousa, were published first in the 1870s. And marches followed a familiar form. First there was an introduction, then the strain or a section, then another strain, then a trio, introduction to the trio, and then two more strains. So most ragtime, classic ragtime, published in the 1890s, 1900s, followed that form. And this was one of the pieces that followed that form, The Entertainer. Now, the most popular piece that was published in the late 1800s was Maple Leaf Rag, which So that's Maple Leaf Rag. So, and that actually sold more than 1 million copies, so it went gold, as we call it now. And another popular piece was The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. And of course, this was part of two ragtime crazes. The ragtime craze in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then the ragtime craze in the 1970s after the movie The Sting was released. How many of you have seen The Sting? Yes. So, of course, most of the music in the soundtrack was ragtime. So here is The Entertainer, and it follows the march form, introduction, and then first strain, and then second strain, trio with an introduction, and then two more strains. So see if you can count the strains, and we'll try to come out all correct at the end. Oh, I can leave it on. Great. Thank you. Yes, that is the plan. We always want to end at the same time. One, two, one, and two, and. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now I want to introduce the band to you. And I'm Sean Fleming. We have Mitch Keene on clarinet. Peter Stewart on trumpet. Sebastian Drosch on trombone. Anne Marie D'Amico on tuba. Phil Clement on banjo and guitar and whatever else we can pick up with him. Right there. He likes to hide behind the piano. And Doug Kennedy on drums. Now, Doug has a few interesting features that are features of his drum set that are kind of typical of early jazz. So, Doug, do you want to say a bit about?
Early jazz had a very different drum feel to it. It was very rudimental, and it was part of a march continuation from marches earlier on. So the drum set kind of represented that. You see a few things that are modern here. For instance, this hi-hat, it wasn't invented back then. I have it there for my purposes. It was invented probably 1930s, so they never had the hi-hat or ride cymbals such as they have nowadays. So it was very rudimental, very march-like, and because a lot of the music was centered around New Orleans, they had a big influx of immigrant players, and in doing so, they had Turkish cymbals that they used. This is kind of a representation of that. It's not really a Turkish cymbal, but and they had a China cymbal, which you'll hear every now and then. So it's kind of interesting. Wood blocks, cowbells, and rim shots were probably more of the style that you'll hear today. We'll try to add a few more of the modern stuff, but basically it's this configuration, march-like, rudimental type of drumming.
Thanks, Doug. Now, Doug moved us into New Orleans, so ragtime was mostly centered in, the nexus was St. Louis, but early jazz really kind of incubated mostly in New Orleans, Louisiana. And this next piece, piano only, is called I Got the Blues. It's by Antonio Maggio, and he was a Sicilian who immigrated to the United States when he was a teenager. And he, for his day job, he worked as a barber. But on his off time, you know, when he had time off, he would play in lots of the bands around New Orleans, and he was a multi-instrumentalist, strings, clarinet. In this, he thought of himself as more of a classical player, but he related the story when he was interviewed in the 50s. He was on a kind of by the water on a and he saw somebody playing guitar, you know, sitting by the water, sitting on the dock of the bay, sort of thing. And no, that's way later. And he heard him play like this. And he would keep playing that over and over. And so Maggio asked the guy, you know, what are you playing? And the guy said, I got the blues. So Maggio decided to make a piece using that motive. And so this piece, published in 1908, was the first blues piece that published blues piece that used the 12-bar blues. And 12-bar blues is found all over the, you know, if you go in any bar, you know, anywhere, if there's a band there, they'll probably play 12-bar blues. And it's just, it's like, it's, that's a harmonic sequence that some blues uses. So this has This is kind of in the form of a ragtime. So it has an introduction, and then it has a 12-bar blues section, and then it has another section that's longer. So this is actually more like a rag than it is a blues, but blues music started way, way back with spirituals that slaves sang, and improvisation on the spirituals, that sort of thing, and work songs. So, and blues tends, historically has tended to be slower. I mean, you can have slow blues, medium blues, and this is a kind of a faster blues. So here is I Got the Blues. So that's kind of straight, just blues, kind of almost, well, boring. But then we move on to Ferdinand Morton, Jelly Roll Morton. And he was one of the, well, he called himself the grandfather of jazz. His pieces were kind of an amalgamation of ragtime, but ragtime taken to another level and kind of swung. So a lot of this early jazz music isn't swung that much, but there is a bit of swing to it. And if you don't know what swinging is, here's Mary Had a Little Lamb, just straight. And here it is swung. So it's da, 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 da. So it's long, short, long, and that's what swinging is. And the big swing thing didn't come in until the swing bands in the 30s and 40s, you know. But this is the beginning of that. So this piece I will play now is Jelly Roll Blues, first published in 1915. And this probably is the first published jazz piece. And the version that I'll be playing here is a transcribed from a piano roll that was recorded in 1924. And you'll be able to hear some ragtime in it, sort of, but also some interesting chords that go places that you don't expect, and stop time sections, and lots of other things. So here's the original Jelly Roll Blues by Jelly Roll Morton. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. Now we bring the band into it. Next tune we'll play is Sugarfoot Stomp. And this is by Joseph King Oliver. Actually, part of it may be by Louis Armstrong as well. And this was a best-selling record in 1925 for Fletcher Henderson and his orchestra. And I have a nice little quote in the program about Henderson's arranger talking to Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong had a book of manuscripts, and Louis said, just pick out one you may like and make an arrangement for Fletcher's orchestra. And then the arranger, Don Redmond, said, so I did, and the one I picked was Sugarfoot Stump. And Joseph the King Oliver was a mentor of, the main mentor of Louis Armstrong. And the King nickname in New Orleans, you had the best trumpet player was called the King. So Joseph Oliver was the best trumpet player at a certain time, and then, of course, Louis Armstrong was the king after him. So here is Sugarfoot Stomp. One, two, three, four. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, that was a fun tune. And next, we're doing another fun tune. So next we have Muhlenberg Joys, first published in 1923 and recorded in 1923. And in 1830, a railroad was built to connect New Orleans to the lakefront at Milneburg, which was a community by the Lake Pontchartrain. After the railroad was built, Milneburg was a popular place for dances and parties and bands, of course, every weekend during the New Orleans summers, which are, of course, are very warm. So Jelly Roll Morton called this tune Milneburg, because that's the name of the community. but somehow along the way it got changed to Millenberg. So here's Millenberg Joys. And most of these have lyrics as well. So, but we don't have a singer today, so oh well. One, two, three, four. Thanks so much. And I wanted to say a bit about the period in the early 1900s. There was a period in New Orleans where jazz became kind of evolved from ragtime and marches and that sort of thing, and spirituals. And one of the primary figures in that time was Charles Joseph Buddy Bolden. And unfortunately, well, I have a photo of him in the program that I made, and it's not a great photo. And unfortunately, no recordings that we know of exist of him playing, but he was considered then and now as one of the three greatest New Orleans early jazz trumpet players, along with Oliver and Armstrong. And Buddy Bolden, there was a guy who did a write-up about Buddy Boland in the 30s, and most of his notes were lost, but he told other people, the reporter, and I'm trying to remember his name, but I can't, but Buddy Boland was responsible for, in orchestras in the late 1890s, most of the orchestras had a lot of string players and not a lot of brass players. So Buddy Boland, his band, he added a lot of brass, which could be heard, they're louder, outside, that kind of thing. So, and of course, it made the music more exciting. And so that, he was one of the primary figures in that proto-jazz period. And no recordings exist of whatever happened in that period in New Orleans. No recordings exist from that time, unfortunately, that we know of. So that's a bit about him. Now, back to the program. We have next Potato Head Blues. And the story with this, you might wonder why it's called Potato Head Blues, because, they don't grow potatoes in New Orleans, as far as I know. I don't know, do they? Potato heads were what people, each political leader had their own band, and they liked to, make the band look good. So they get people who didn't necessarily play the best, they were picked for their looks. And the story was that they, the band leaders put potatoes in their instruments so they couldn't play. So they were called potato heads. It may be true. It's a good story. And fortunately, we don't have anybody today who has potatoes in there. Do you have a potato, Mitch? No, no potatoes. No. So here's Potato Head. What did you say? No, we're not here for our looks. Thank heavens. Yes. Except for Phil. He's the centerpiece. Yeah. So here's Potato Head Blues, and this features one of the early, just magnificent solos by Louis Armstrong, played magnificently by Peter Stewart. Not too fast, not too slow. Yeah, right? Just like the three little bears, whatever. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, so good. Yeah. And that is one of my favorite recordings. You know, if you get to, go to YouTube or Venmo or whatever and listen to that. Oh, so good. So next, we have Tiger Rag. And this is actually one of the earlier recordings. And this wasn't recorded in New Orleans. Was it, Doug? No, New York? Yeah, New York. Recorded in 1917 first, and of course, covered over 100 times after, by Benny Goodman and Frank Sinatra and all kinds of people. So here's Tiger Rag, and we have some cat-like behavior over here in the trombone and clarinet. So you'll see what I mean. Feline behavior. One, two, three, four. so good. That was some positively feral behavior over there. Now, we don't have time to do Shreveport Stomp, unfortunately. So, though I love it so. So we're going to move on to King Porter Stomp. And King Porter was another jazz musician who worked in New Orleans. And this was probably the first published composition to use the stomp harmonic progression. And let's see if, well, it's this progression here. I'll play it for you. So that is a stomp progression, and you can find that in some early jazz, mostly in the numbers with stomp in the name. And we have another one of those today, black bottom stomp, and also in a lot of swing band era, jazz big band era compositions, arrangements, including lots of those by Benny Goodman, etc., etc. So here is King Porter Stomp. And it's another one by Jelly Roll Morton. One, two, three, four. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Oh, I love this stuff. So we're going to do one more number, Black Bottom Stomp, and then I'll open it up for some questions, a few, like 5 or 10 minutes of questions, and then we're going to do another number to end out today's set. So here is Black Bottom Stomp, and you might, if you're familiar with, Dixieland music, early jazz, there's the rhythm section, which I'm a part of, and Doug and Phil on banjo. And then there's Anne Marie. Then there are the instruments at the forefront, the clarinet, who plays kind of arpeggio, like that kind of stuff on the top. Then trumpet, kind of usually melody. And then trombone, lots of slides and things. And that's the Dixieland sound. And Black Bottom Stomp is a prime example of that sound. So here it is, and it's another Jelly Roll Morton tune. And by the way, there's a really interesting recorded interview that was recorded in 1935, I think it was, under the auspices of the Smithsonian. So you might want to listen to that if you're interested. It goes into some interesting, some of his, what he listened to when he was growing up. And it's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like there was a lot of French opera happening at the time in New Orleans. So if you listen to some of Jelly Roll Morton's pieces, you can hear kind of melodic French opera kind of melodies. So that's a great thing to listen to. So here's Black Bottom Stomp. One, two, three, four. you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So now, does anybody have any questions? Sir. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we, this group is an offshoot of my ragtime orchestra. And I think the first concert that we did was in 2014, maybe? Does that sound? Yeah, sounds good. So 2014, and yeah, we're based in Maine. I'm in Damascotta. So, and everybody here, as far as I know, is a resident of Maine, mostly midcoast Maine. Like Anne Marie lives in Harpswell, and Mitch lives in Warren, and Peter lives Waldoboro.
Yeah, Waldoboro, Washington.
Right. And then, yeah, so we're all, I think maybe Phil, you're in Hope, right? Union, okay. So that's over in Route 17. So, yeah, did I answer everything? Yes. We don't have a nonprofit designation because it's just me, you know, doing everything. So I haven't gotten around to it. I'd like to do that at some point, yeah. But I need to get a board to do that, and so maybe down the road, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So where in the evolution of jazz did scat come into? Where in the evolution of jazz did scat become part of jazz?
Yeah, there were, in the late 1800s, there was spoken poetry in Louisiana, and I forget the name. There's a name for it. I'm blanking on it, but, well, it's not rap. It's called something else. I mean, it later morphed into rap, but you could call that the precursor of rap, spoken poetry, and spoken in rhythms. So it's a very interesting. There are some recordings of it from the early 1900s. Oh, the work songs, yeah. Yeah, some of the work songs were kind of verging on rap. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the origin of swing.
Rhythmically, I want to say something about rag, where that term comes from, as in ragtime. What's rag?
Right. Yeah, I did leave that out, didn't I?
Yes.
Rag refers to partly syncopation. So, and Maple Leaf Rag is a good example. That kind of thing. So syncopation is stresses on notes that aren't on a main beat or off the beat, that sort of thing. So that's a big part of rag. And ragtime refers to, not staying, I mentioned it, ragtime developed from marches, and marches, pretty much stayed on the beat, quarters, eighths. It's like, so it's all not, you can make that into ragtime, but it's not ragtime, not the way Sousa wrote it. So, yeah. Questions? Oh, yes.
Do you have other members of your group, and do you trade around parts? And are these just Doug's set, and is there another set that somebody else brings?
Okay, well, first of all, the reason why we didn't do the concert in January when it was first scheduled was because the drummer we had since the group started passed away in an auto accident. So that was our drummer, and we do miss him quite a lot. And Doug is a multi-instrumentalist. Doug was a music educator for a long time in Bangor and wherever else. And so he plays drums, bass, trombone, trumpet. So Doug was, offered to play drums, to switch to drums, and then so I got I knew Sebastian from gigs in the past, so I got Sebastian. So we were able to fill it out. And this is Doug's set, and you notice Doug had a house fire. Was it a year and a half ago, or? And so you can see the smoke on. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been through, the wars. Yeah. And the yes. And the yes, ma'am.
What is your earliest recollection of being attracted to this wonderful music?
Okay. My grandparents, the Grinnells, Arthur and Virginia Grinnell, they had a music shop in Camden on Union Street. And, I grew up in the Camden, Rockland area. And I used to go over there, and they had a bunch of instruments. They had organ. He sold Bill Branson organs, and they sold pianos, and they sold other instruments. And they had a player piano, and it had Jelly Roll Morton rolls. So in one of the rolls they had was the piece that I played, the Jelly Roll Rag, that very roll. So I was able to hear how they played, how Jelly Roll Morton played, and how some other people played. And there's something, this is getting kind of technical, but there's something, the way they played was, there's something they used called displacement. So not all the notes would strike at the same time. So it's just, yeah, so I became very interested in that. And I was a classically trained pianist, and also I played a bunch of other instruments, and I didn't really get interested. Actually, ragtime, I taught myself how to play when I was starting at 13. In the first piece I taught myself how to play, not having played piano before, was Moonlight Sonata, Sonata Quasi Una Fantasia. And the second piece was Maple Leaf Rag. So I was interested in ragtime, but I wasn't really interested in, this early jazz stuff until, I don't know, the middle, maybe 2005 or so. I started to get really interested in it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Some of the music that you played sounds like what accompanies silent movies. And so where does that intersect in the history?
Yeah. Well, a lot of African American players, pianists and banjo players and guitar players, etc., they made a living by playing for movie houses, as well as red light district places and bars, and so there was a lot of development of this sort of music in those situations, because I'm sure they listened to what the players listened to what was around them, and they maybe used some of those techniques. But there were also books that people who played for movie, silent films could use. And they had I have a few of these books at home. They have headings at the top of pages that say, something fast or galloping or sad or melancholy. So you turn to that page and you play. And so if you didn't want to make up stuff on the spot, you could do that as well. So there was a lot of crossover. It was kind of the Silicon, you know how Silicon Valley was in the 80s and 90s, and well, New Orleans was kind of the Silicon Valley of jazz in the early 1900s. So, yes.
So, you played blues, songs, rag.
Yeah.
Are there any other genres that are considered like classic from that era, or those the two main?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of the music from that era took the form of the kind of dances that people danced to it. So there are cakewalks, and there are two-steps, and there are four-steps, and that sort of thing. So what was your question again? I lost my train of thought.
You played the three forms. I wonder if there are others, or those who really are what was central to that era.
Yeah. Well, there were spirituals that were played. You know, the quintessential New Orleans funeral, they'd have a procession and they'd play slow spirituals, that sort of thing. So there were spirituals, there was gospel music, and there are different sorts of blues too. You know, there's slow 12-bar blues, there's slow blues that uses other numbers of bars, and there are faster blues, and there was music that was called blues that wasn't really strictly blues, but it was just kind of that sort of thing. So all kinds of different things, and people were, you know, making up names for things. So it was a big period of development, and that, yeah. Oh, well, that was the center of where jazz started. There were other, and of course it moved to Chicago, starting in the 20s and 30s. But that's really where it started, and there were so many different people coming into New Orleans because it was, you know, one of the big ports of the time. So all kinds of nationalities and different sorts of music. Yes, sir.
Have you tried writing your own piece in this style?
I've improvised on various tunes, but I've never actually written down anything. I tend to, the kind of compositions I do are either choral arrangements or compositions, or I write a lot of organ music, but I've never actually written down a rag or anything like that. So, anybody else? Sir, yes.
When did jazz first arrive in Maine? Was there
Gosh, that is a good question. I don't. Yeah, it's not here yet. Yeah. Really? Oh. That is a great question, and I don't know the answer. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, Rich Tozier. Yes, he would know. Yeah, I'm trying to think through my data bank here. Well, I'll think about it when we play the last piece, the chant, and I'll see if I can come up with an answer. And if you guys know anything, yeah, or you can look it up on your phones.
I found it.
Oh, yes.
Jazz arrived in Maine in the 1920s when the band leader Duke Ellington performed at Old Orchard Beach.
Ah, I'm surprised there wasn't anybody better known. Wow, that's cool.
Artie Hall had a couple of marches which are sort of gay.
Oh, okay, with syncopations and things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what the name was, African Queen or something.
Oh, African Queen, yeah.
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 Sean, repeat it for us.
Well, I can't repeat everything. Why don't you just...
Well, I think that R.B. Hall wrote some. Oh, R.B. Hall wrote some of his band music, verses on ragtime, or was influenced by that. He was a contemporary of Sousa.
Right. Yeah.
And he's the Maine.
Oh yes, R.B. Hall. Yeah, there is an R.B. Hall Day, you know, and bands play at R.B. Hall Day, and it's held in different places, you know, every year. Great. Well, any more questions? Happy to. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to make a comment.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
About traditional jazz, which has always been a favorite of mine, but it's sad. My wife and I travel worldwide to see different traditional music when we can do it. But what happened with COVID is really hurt us badly as people who appreciate that type of music.
Yeah.
Because the audience is generally much older, and the musicians equally so.
Right.
And
except for us, we're the the exception.
But that's nice to see this, and it's nice to have it available here. And I hope there's a rebirth like there is with several other types of things.
Yeah, well, there are bands in New Orleans that do play this sort of music, and one of them, of course, is Tuba Skinny, which, if you haven't heard them, I'd definitely listen to some Tuba Skinny on Facebook. Yeah, I have a friend who lives in New Orleans, and he just loves that band. Yeah, actually, we had a concert in Harpswell, or Bailey's Island, or wherever it was, last summer, and we had a lot of kids come to the concert, and they were actually dancing around. So if they hear the music, then they might be interested in it, I think.
At the jazz festivals, they do have groups come in and dance, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is kids.
Yeah, speaking of dancing, with my ragtime orchestra, I had a couple of shows in which we had some dancers, and we danced some of those Castle, Irene, and what was the guy's name? You know, Vernon, thank you. Castle tunes, like the Castle rag. And we actually had a session before the concert where we taught people some of the dances. So, hoping to do that again at some point. Okay, well, here is the chant. And so, thank you for being a great audience and having such great questions, and great to see you all. And we'll end with the chant. And this is an interesting tune by Mel Stitzel. And it's very interesting in one respect. It changes keys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 times in the space of 12 measures. So, woo! One, two, three, four. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. Do you want to hear one more, or do you need to? All right, well, we have one more, and this can involve audience singing. Yes, and the band's going to sing as well. So most of us are going to sing. So this is, well, you'll know what it is, and I'll point to you when it's time to sing. One, two, three, four.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you all for coming. See you next year.